now we're going to have a professional panel about how to build a culture of A/B testing into your company. I think everybody is here. We're missing one person in the sideline, right? Let's see. Okay, so I want to invite Ilya and Jonas to the stage. I think we're missing a Jim. Hey guys.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey, I think we're missing one person.
Are we waiting for Jim Stern?
Yeah.
I saw him outside, so maybe someone can just grab him. Okay.
Okay, he's coming in 2 minutes. Let's not tell him what we discussed. It will be a surprise for him when he joins us. When he walks in, I want everybody to say, oh, so this is how you do A/B testing. We got it. And see how we react. So let's do a quick roundup of getting to know each other. I'd love you guys to each introduce yourself. And then what I'm hoping this to be is the most efficient, how would you say this? Hands-on panel you've ever seen. So I'm really hoping that after this, you know how to integrate this culture into your companies and how to start. So let's start with a quick haze and intros.
Sure. So my name is Johannes. I've been in online marketing for, I don't know, maybe 8 years or so now. I hold a master's degree in e-marketing and social media, in case you didn't know that existed. At the moment, I'm the head of growth at a startup called Truly Experiences, which is a marketplace for experiences. And yeah, I spent a lot of time actually building a culture of experimentation and learning. So I'm excited to share my findings about that.
Amazing, thank you. We have Jim joining us. Hey, Jim. So we're in the intro session, so it's okay.
Hi, and my name is Jim.
Hi, I'm Ilya, current about 10 years in the industry. So been A/B testing a lot in different places. Now the head of acquisition of WalkMe.
Amazing. So let's dive straight into it. I know that in the audience we have companies in very different sizes. So I think my first question would be, how would you guys, like what's the size of the company you think you should have before you start going into A/B testing seriously? Or what stage of the company you should be at? This goes out to all of you.
I'm always willing to go first. I think it's not a matter of the size of the company, but the amount of data that you have. So I put on a conference like this, and I get a couple of hundred people a day coming to my website. I don't have enough data. Doesn't matter how big my company is, I don't have enough data. So if your business model is such that you get lots of people show up or lots of use on the mobile, then you have enough information to leverage and get value from.
So totally agree with Jim on that. But I also want to add another thing, which is, so A/B testing or testing in general should be a mindset rather than just some kind of technology that you apply, right? So I think testing different approaches should be that you should be doing from day one, if you ask me. Even if you have a small sample size and you talk to just a few people and try to validate your business model, as a startup it makes sense all the time. That might not be statistically correct A/B testing, but it's still testing different approaches, and I think that's really important as a mindset.
I totally agree. It really depends on what you're testing, because when you're small, it's very hard to test everything. But at least test your website visits or see what you can test, which is a bit significant, and go there. Because otherwise there is nothing. I mean, we're just putting some idea that some graphic designer put on for us, and we have no idea if it really works well or not.
So I think one of the things a lot of companies handle, and I agree that first of all, testing, growth, everything is more than a mindset, than a set of tools that you use. But I think that when you have a small company starting up, at the beginning you just do what you do to have something at hand. And at some point you have to start, you go through the process of saying, okay, wait, let's experiment more. I agree it's very data-based. I can be a 100-people company. If I have 2 people on my website, then A/B testing won't mean much. But how do you start implementing that mindset towards your C-level? One of the biggest challenges that we've experienced with companies is that the C-level aren't buying into the testing environment or the mindset in how the company operates. You know, developers aren't dedicated to it, marketers aren't dedicated to it. You know how it is. So what would be like your first steps towards your management to implement that mindset in how you work?
Okay, so maybe I'm slightly opinionated on this one, but so for me, it's really if you don't embrace testing in a C level, then I'm not sure what you actually believe in. Like, for me, it's kind of embracing reality, right? What you're trying to find out with testing is seeing what is the fundamental truth of what we are trying to achieve here, right? So if you don't want to face the truth, then I don't know if you should be in C level. So that's my part of the first answer, maybe.
Well, people who are at the C level got there because they made really good decisions from gut feel. They were lucky. So never use the word hypothesis when you're talking to a C-level person, but ask them those questions. How do you think we could get the people who come to us to interact more and get them to come up with a hypothesis and say, hey, that's a great idea. We can test that and make it seem like they thought up the idea of testing and congratulate them for running a great test.
Totally agree with Jim, and also you could do it the other way around. You can start testing from what you have, what you're able to do, because you are able to run campaigns or you're able to set up the website. So just do some small tests, show the places where the test is significant. Say, oh, we improved it here by 31%. So let's do it company-wide or whatever works.
Yeah, starting with small wins. Just run a small test to show the concept. Here's how we set it up. Here's the data we used. Here are the results we got. And here's the change in behavior that we're going to enact because of the results of the test. Because the other hazard you run into with C-level people is they want to, if we can test everything, let's test everything. Well, what are you going to do if, I give you that results, how will it change your behavior? And if they don't have an answer, they just want to know, you say, great, but it's going to go lower on the priority list.
The other thing I'd like to add here is C-level people usually talk in terms of revenue, right? They want to know how much is this going to drive the business. So it's talking the language of those people makes it a lot easier, right? So if you, let's say you have a mandate to run some tests because you're a CEO or a C-level person believes in that concept, or at least gives you some time, then tell them, okay, this is kind of the impact this will have on your business in actual dollar figures, whatever currency you're operating in. And I think that will kind of always help rather than talking conversion rate or things like that, which are a lot more micro.
Yeah, don't talk about conversion rates or bounce rates or even engagement. It's the 4 business drivers: make more, spend less, make your customers happier, and improve efficiency. And if you can tie anything that you're doing to one of those 4, the C-level will understand.
And they usually like to hear the word ROI. It kind of works.
So I want to challenge you guys a little bit more with the bringing that mindset into the company. So from meeting a lot of startups in Israel and companies in Israel, we know that a lot of the time the culture doesn't exist of testing, of like really doing smart A/B testing, meaning really relying on data, having clean data, having the right infrastructure to do it. And one, I think that's like a very famous marketing sentence from the 80s and the 90s, saying that sometimes like the product sucks, but this is what we sell. So sometimes what happens a lot of the time in the marketing teams is that they come up and say, we need to do testing, we know we need to have a better process for this, but this is what we get, what can we do? So I want to ask you, let's say that you would come to a company right now who doesn't have the infrastructure or the culture or the mindset for testing. What would be kind of the 5 first steps you would do into kind of changing that around?
The first step is go work for a different company. If you don't have the infrastructure, you don't have the mindset, you don't have the culture, why are you working there?
Maybe that's what they brought you there to do, you know? What if you're the person they brought in to do that? So what would be your first 5 steps?
I think the first thing is to go find one of the many tools that are out there. You don't need to build a huge infrastructure. You can just go get a couple of tools, put a couple of tags on a couple of pages, and run a few simple tests. And if you can prove the value of testing, then the resources will follow.
And then in addition to just having the infrastructure to do testing, I think it's also important to get all the people actually on board eventually, right? To work on that constantly, communicate about what you're doing, why you're doing it, and make growth or experimentation everyone's job, right? Otherwise it's never going to work. And there are things you can do where, for example, you could open up ideation, so ideas for experiments to the whole company, and then celebrate people who had put a good proposal in. And then also, very important I think is embrace failure, embrace experiments that didn't succeed, but actually in a way they did because you know what you should not be doing, and that's also really good learning.
And it really depends on what's your mandate, what are you supposed to do? Because if the company has already bought in, I would start from the infrastructure, because the infrastructure can really help you to test further. If you need to put in this culture into the company and the CEO says, okay, help me do that, so that's a big part of the data. Once you put in the infrastructure, you can start collecting the data, which will help you overall, especially if you don't have a lot of data. And then get in with tools or develop or do whatever, or bring somebody in who will help you, but really infrastructure is a key. Understanding what you're going to be testing is also a really, really important factor, because there is so much you can test, and you start from the lowest level there is usually, or the easiest place you can improve on from what it seems, and then we go on.
One of the other ways to encourage the cultural change and the mindset change, there's a wonderful website called Which Test Won. And you look at 2 different landing pages and you go, well, that's better. And then you click on that and it says, no, you're wrong. This one performed better. And you can do that over and over again and find out you don't know anything. It's like you don't know what's going to win. So that becomes a game inside some companies where you can take printouts of 2 landing pages and put it in the hallway and ask people to vote. And after 3 days, you run the test and then you show the results. And you can make a game out of it. You can see who has the best eye for what's the best landing page or what's the best email subject line. And everybody is always shocked at how wrong they are.
Yeah, I think the one thing that constant testing teaches you is that you have to be really, humility is extremely important, right? Because we all need to embrace that we don't really know what's going to work for another business, even if you have loads of years of experience. Maybe even Jim doesn't know all the answers for a new business. But it just, we got to assume we don't know. We don't know, and we need to, test or at least talk to people to find out.
And from a different angle, so if your team is resistant to change, or people are saying, okay, we want to test, how are we going to test it? What are we going to do with it? So sometimes you can actually write a protocol, okay, that's a minimum for the test. Like if the people have no idea what statistical significance is, you have to explain it. You have to be very, very clear on what you're looking for. Because if there are 2 campaigns, one got you 10 clicks and the other one 21 clicks, it doesn't matter how many conversions you got. It's not statistical. It's not going to help you with reaching anything which is meaningful. And you have to, especially if the organization is bigger than 5 people, so you have to really be clear about that and set specific guidelines or rules or however it fits to the organization.
I think the other piece that's really difficult for companies that are just starting to test, to get their minds around, is that the majority of tests that you run will be inconclusive. A and B will come out the same. And it's very frustrating, especially if you're trying to get a culture of testing started, where people who are providing the resources and paying for it see test after test after test with no results. And the lesson is to try to come up with 2 options that are different enough that there will be an obvious winner, but it doesn't happen right away. It's hard to do.
So I want to ask you this structural question. Let's say you run into this. You've been doing a few testing. Your results are inconclusive, as you said, or even worse, just everything is kind of plunking down. And your management level is starting to kind of show that they're running out of breath to do that, or they're running out of patience for your experiments. Some marketers here probably have heard so far. What would you do, or how would you communicate with them to buy more time, or to show that this is actually a learning process?
So an extremely important part of testing is the end result, to communicate not just A or B was the best one, but what did we learn? So if we have A, which is the control, it's our website as it exists, and B is the new thing we want to try, and the new thing fails, what did we learn? What can we assume about what it failed, and how can we change the test next time? If we realize that B was a poor choice because, then we can come up with a new test to see if that next hypothesis is correct. I think the most important thing is to find out what is top of mind to the person with the control of the budget. What is the most important thing to them? And if it's just revenue, okay, fine, we'll go after conversion. As long as every test you run has and here is what we learned, then it's possible to embrace failure, because it's not a failure, it's a learning. That's the old phrase, there is no lose, there's win or learn.
You guys have you want to add anything to it?
I think it was pretty perfect. I just want to repeat the one thing that Jim said earlier, is like, make sure the first tests you're running are as big of a change as possible. Like the A and the B need to be really different. Don't just start with like, oh, it's easy to change the button color or things like that. It's just not going to work. And inconclusive results are actually the worst results. It's not if you have an experiment where you see, oh, B is performing worse. There's a learning. Inconclusive doesn't tell you anything. Oh, well, actually it tells you that you should not be testing buttons, at least, right? So that's another learning. But yeah, that's the most important thing.
I completely agree. I mean, we have two types of testing. We have the big tests and we have the small tests of the button, the color, the picture, the whatever. And we have to choose, and in the beginning you have to choose the big ones. Otherwise, we're just not getting too far. And like Jim said, the control group must be there. And if you have big traffic, don't test 50% of it. Test 20%, test 15%. Keep the ROI pretty much where it is. Show the option to grow or not to grow if it fails. But don't kill the ROI, because then the management's going to be much more eager to get the real results really fast. Otherwise, you're killing their bottom line.
Do you feel tension in running tests and experiments? Do you feel any tensions with the C-suite level or with management? Or do you usually see this as a process which both sides are eager to test and learn more in most companies you've met or the experiences you have? Do you understand my question? Okay, so because we're talking about building this into the culture, and what we really want to get is, what are the objections the people here are going to get when they run this? So do you find that a lot of the times you would have kind of a tension between upper management looking at your experiments, and you'll be finding yourself, instead of focusing on how do we improve, to how do we protect ourselves from management? You want to say the yeah with the microphone, though, I think.
Part of getting senior management on board is getting them to understand the purpose of testing. And if senior management wants to test something to prove that, to limit liability, or to prove that their idea was best, yes, you have to do what they want, because they hold the purse strings, they have the money. But once they come on board, then you can go off in the corner and do testing that's actually going to make marketing better. It will make it better for customer experience. And you've got to get around that initial curve of getting them to understand the value, at which point they probably will lose interest because now it's just a process that can go run. And you can now go run the process. But getting people on board initially, sometimes you have to play those political games, yes.
So let's talk a little bit more about the process. How do you manage, do you have, we work with growth meetings once a week. How do you guys manage your own process? Like in the company of running the tests, results?
So one part of it, so basically we follow an agile process with sprints of between 1 and 3 weeks, and then we have growth meetings once a week where our CEO would sometimes even join if he's really interested in the results. Apart from that, there's also wider communication happening on what are the key results, and when I say results, I mean learnings from experiments that are happening probably like once a month as a communication going out. That's kind of our main.
So what would be the structure of the meeting, for example? Really digging deep into...
Of the growth
of the
meeting? So the growth meeting usually starts with looking at metrics in our case, so which metrics have changed, and then actually asking the question why. Ideally, the metrics we look at are also tied to experiments we're running, so we would actually not just look at a huge dashboard, but we found it a lot more useful to look at maybe 5 metrics that we're trying to have an impact on. Then we look at, okay, how have they developed over time, and then can we explain the why, right? Can we look at test results that are related to that? And then it's looking ahead, what does this mean, right? So either new experiments, changing the ones that we have, or also concluding your experiments and rolling it out.
And how do you guys do the prioritization? There are different methods. There's like the ICE method. There's different ways of doing that. How do you, first of all, how do you hold the process of ideation? And then how you prioritize what side, like do you do this with your entire team? Some of them you do it by yourself. How do you go about it? It's a question for everyone. So how do you manage the ideation process, and then how you tackle prioritization?
So usually the priority, you need to define what's the idea, right? If you want to increase your leads, increase your ROI, like you need to understand the bottom line. And then it really depends on which part of the team, or if you have only one person, which part of what he's doing will affect it the most. And that's pretty much how you prioritize. I mean, the step where you can increase the most, which is not the most dangerous, so that's pretty much where you go in.
If you have 15 ideas on how to increase lead gen for next week,
somebody has to be responsible for that, for standing in that place and being on the spot saying yes, no, yes, no.
So what's the process of saying we're going to run this test, not this test? How do you decide where are you going to start?
We can discuss it, and then usually like either I choose or the person responsible for it chooses. Because
I'm challenging you into going deeper into what's the discussion like.
The discussion, we're trying to see the impact, because the end result and what are the difference. Okay, so we're not going to test probably 50 different creatives, right? We're testing 2 or 3 or 4 maybe tops, and then we're saying, okay, where are we going with this? What's going to happen? How long it's going to take us? Is it a test that's going to take 3 months now? Are we wasting our time? Should we do the first 2 and then another 2? What impact are we going to get? If it's better by 10%, how better it's going to be? If it's better by 100%, okay, how fast it's going to be, and so on.
So to look at a very large company that's doing a lot of tests, one example is Twitter. And the advantage they have is that they have one platform, they're trying to accomplish one thing, which is to get more tweets to happen. And they're all using the same data set, and the company has a policy. It's the 1% policy. Anybody in the company can run a test against 1% of the customers without any approval. And if you find a result and you show it to upper management, they'll say, okay, well then what experimentation did you do after that? Now, it seems like quite a gift to be given, 1% of Twitter traffic is a lot of data. So what a joy to just be able to play. However, if your test does something horribly wrong to 1% of the data, it will cost you your job. So you better be confident that you're testing something that's between two good things instead of a good and a bad thing. Now, if I have everybody in the company able to run a test at any time, how on earth do you keep the tests from crossing over onto each other? The answer is machine learning. So when you put together a test, you're going to identify what data elements you are testing, what specific items on a page or in the process you are testing, and it gets fed into the hopper, and the machine figures out that we can run these 25 tests in parallel and they won't cross over. But these other 50 have to wait till later. So in a small group, it's a conversation. In a big group, you need a machine to figure it out.
Okay, and when you report results, how do you hypothesize about your next test that you're going to run? You get the results for your, how do you decide whether should we iterate on this test that we've already been running, start something totally new, or totally scrape it?
Well, that depends on who owns the business process you are testing. Somebody has to be the decision maker. If I have 10 people who want to run tests, they have to run it for the purpose of a business owner who's going to be making the business decisions based on the results, and they're going to be the one sitting at the head of the table saying, yes, that test, no, not that test.
So who would be your team or your initial team to start experimenting within your company? Who do you want to have on your small initial testing team?
So I think a team should always be cross-functional. So you need someone who can handle data. You need someone who's ideally a developer. It depends what your product is, but probably front end, could also be back end, could be anything, right? Depending on what you're testing. You want to have someone who is actually leading the test, so like a product manager or a project manager. It depends, again, how you phrase that. And then you usually need some creative input as well. So that could be a designer, someone who writes copy, but these could be people who help with certain experiments and then step out, or could be part of the team in general. That's how it works at Truly.
It really depends on the amount of the marketing you're doing, or if it's a product you're testing, like because Twitter is more a product aspect, less marketing, because you're doing it from inside of the company. So if you have a lot of campaign managers working, so you have to create the infrastructure for them to work. If it's a small company, it's pretty much what you said, like somebody has to know the data. Maybe it's somebody from the 10 people of the company, so he's the same one who is the product marketer or whatever. Just like somebody who really understands what are the numbers saying. And somebody from the creative side, it's a must.
What are your best tips for getting your entire team or company excited about that process? How do you maintain momentum? How do you keep people engaged in it?
It's funny you say get people excited about process. I gave a talk last year about exactly that, and everyone was like, oh my God, we're talking about process here. But so I think we touched on this earlier, right? It's like showing some first wins, I think is definitely helping. Also, I mean, people are wired differently, right? So some people might be really excited about data, but other people might be more excited about seeing different designs. So just make sure when you communicate, you show, first of all, the why, but then also what are the different variations. And people might come back to you like, oh my God, this looks so good, or that, but other people might be asking about data. So it's kind of trying to get different people interested with different triggers. And then obviously your C-level as well, talking about the ROI and the revenue impact.
One of the other things that some people respond to well is when you describe our entire customer base as lab rats. They're guinea pigs, and we can play with them. And the people, oh, really? Tens of thousands of customers, and we can just change something on the website and see how they respond, and we can impact their lives. Ooh, and they get excited about that.
Was that the original messaging for Facebook? That was the tagline? Yeah.
We usually talk about in human psychology, like how do you affect the people around you? We don't usually say lab rats, but it's pretty much the same, right? I mean, we're talking about how can you affect the people, because it really gets people excited. Because you can really affect everybody. It doesn't mean if you sit near them in a bus or anywhere, just people here in the convention. I mean, so it's kind of easy to get them, especially your team, on board. The management is a bit different.
So you've got your team together, you start to understand your process. How do you direct the first batch of experiments you wanna run? What's your process for deciding what area to focus on to start with?
Somebody, sometimes the hippo, the highest paid person's opinion, sometimes just somebody who's frustrated that they've never gotten their idea put forward, has a hypothesis. They have an idea. They have a concept. Don't call it a hypothesis. They know the website is bad because it doesn't have a blue button. It's like, okay, great, we can test that. But it really requires that spark of somebody who has a really strong opinion, because then there's a purpose.
And then also you probably have goals for your business and for your role in particular. So we usually work with quarterly goals. So let's say you have a goal of, let us say, it's improving your conversion rate on your website. It's not very specific, but something more specific than that, by 16% by the end of March. So then you want to kind of look at, okay, what are the different things that we could be doing? Create a list of, of ideas, and then you can follow a pretty simple process of using an ICE model, as we mentioned earlier. So what's the impact? What could be the impact based on some data we have? So how much traffic goes to the homepage if we want to change that? How many people go into our checkout flow if you want to change that? And then what could we reasonably assume the impact could be? So you have at least like a range. And then secondly, how easy is this? Or how hard? And thirdly, are we confident this would work? So just to see, right? So have we seen similar things before, or do we have some evidence that this could be successful?
It has a lot to do with how easy it is to implement and the confidence it might work. And also the people, the product manager, whoever is on the team usually has a lot of ideas, and it's either about the blue button, or he says, oh, we do this change and it will surely work. And then the people from the inside, sometimes they really have good ideas, because they're there and they're frustrated with their ideas not being tested yet, so it's a good time to actually do that. And like we had one case when somebody took our own product, like on WalkMe, put it on our homepage and increased the conversions by like 900%, which is crazy and doesn't make any sense, because he changed something in the way we show walkthroughs to the people, and he tested it for 3 months, and he was on it. He stayed till 9 p.m. like almost every day to do small checks, and he was excited about it. So it really, many times if somebody is really excited and knows the stuff, so it gets a lot to the success.
Okay, the interesting thing here is that there's two approaches. One, you start with ideas, and the other one, you start kind of with analyzing the data that you have to start with your experimentations. Now, Jim, you started off by saying get somebody with a strong opinion who wants to change something. And you two start off with kind of looking at your data and saying, where should we start? Like the highest impact, the biggest impact on our goals, or what do you guys think should actually lead that process in the long run? It's kind of an easy question, but it's also kind of hard.
What it should be in the long run?
Yeah, so if you start with ideas, and if you start with gut feeling, and then you have to test gut feeling, the cool thing about this is that you get a lot of excitement, right? Because people want to see if their ideas worked or not. But it's very hard to direct and take your company to your next business goal, because people have their own emotional baggage, etc., and they don't prioritize based on goals. They prioritize based on what they've encountered most daily.
I mean, hopefully this is something that can keep people excited throughout for years, hopefully. I mean, otherwise maybe they shouldn't be working at your company. But it's really about having wins that you can share, learnings, and then if you were asking about how the process should change, definitely your hippo, hopefully only in the beginning, is the one giving you the idea. usually is also my experience, the hippo will at some point leave you alone and let you run your thing. I mean, if you have a process that is reasonable, right? So if that person can see, and usually these people are not stupid, they're there for a reason most of the time, they trust you, right? It's about trust. So it's building trust at the end of the day. If you don't build trust with your senior people, then probably you're also not going to be at this company for much longer anyway.
Okay, so let's take the last few minutes that we have. Let's talk a little bit about tools. So each one would kind of, I don't want to say some or recommend like 3 or 4 tools they think every company should start implementing in order to start doing their tests.
That's a hard one for me because usually we're building most of our stuff on our own from scratch, so because nothing else really works on the long run. But for sure, A/B testing, I mean, you want to name stuff?
Yeah. You have favorites?
Wow, I need to take a moment about that because like the A/B testing tools, Optimizely style, and I don't remember most of them because really haven't used them for a while.
You can just focus on what you guys are, kind of developing inside. Or you can maybe tackle the question, should you focus on building your own tool versus kind of using other like third-party tools?
I think it's really important to use external tools in the beginning because you just don't have the budget, the money, and the teams to do that. And on the long run, if there is stuff that you need to do, like if you're tracking some special data that nobody can relate to, or your tests cannot go to the data into your Salesforce on CRM, and you can, if you get offline conversions, you have to track it. So you have to build something that really works with it, or find a tool that can do that to the last stage of the sale or post-sale or whatever it counts.
Okay, so tools are obviously just there to kind of make something happen that you are, make a goal happen that you have, right? So one of the goals we discussed was you need to prioritize experiments. So what could we use for that? You could start with a simple spreadsheet, have 3 columns, or 4 probably, the name, then impact, confidence and ease, and then some supporting data. You could use a tool for that, for example, Pipify, I can recommend, which has some templates for growth experimentation. And then, you need to be able to run the tests somehow. So some A/B testing or multivariate testing platform would be useful. Google Optimize might be a good start because it's free. And then it's about communicating these results. Okay, we've got 1 minute left, so maybe Jim has some ideas.
As the board chair of the Digital Analytics Association and the producer of the Marketing Evolution Experience Conference, all of the tool vendors are my clients. I recommend all of them.
Okay. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you for being with us.